Karoline Leavitt's recent legal action against The View represents a significant escalation in the ongoing friction between conservative voices and mainstream media platforms. At the center of this controversy is a lawsuit filed in response to on-air remarks that Leavitt claims were both defamatory and deeply misogynistic. This move is not just a routine legal response. It marks a calculated, high-profile effort to push back against what she and her supporters see as a persistent campaign to diminish conservative figures through ridicule and character attacks, particularly when they involve successful young women. According to reports and analysis, the lawsuit stems from a specific episode of The View, during which hosts made comments questioning Leavitt's legitimacy as a political commentator and professional. Their remarks suggested that her rise was due more to her physical appearance and less to her capabilities, experience, or intellect. These statements struck a nerve, not only with Leavitt herself, but with many who viewed the incident as yet another example of a media double standard. In their view, such a portrayal of a young conservative woman would be unthinkable if directed at a liberal counterpart. The language used on the show was not only dismissive, but loaded with insinuations that undermined the seriousness of her career. Critics argue that it crossed a line from mere political disagreement into personal attack. In doing so, it highlighted a troubling pattern where partisan animosity is cloaked in entertainment and comedy, providing plausible deniability, while still delivering damaging narratives. Leavitt's decision to file suit is grounded in the belief that this pattern must be challenged through legal accountability rather than public outrage alone. Supporters of the lawsuit argue that had these comments been directed toward someone of a different political affiliation or toward a figure aligned with progressive politics, there would have been immediate apologies and possible disciplinary action. The fact that the remarks were directed at a conservative woman adds fuel to long-standing claims that much of the mainstream media operates with a political bias, selectively applying moral standards depending on the ideological leanings of the person in question. From a legal perspective, the case hinges on whether the statements made by the hosts can be legally classified as defamatory. Defamation law requires the plaintiff to prove that the statements were false, made with actual malice or reckless disregard for the truth, and resulted in reputational or professional harm. In high-profile media cases, the burden of proof is notoriously difficult to meet, particularly for public figures. However, this lawsuit is about more than winning a judgment in court. It is a message, a challenge to the entrenched idea that certain media personalities are untouchable simply because their commentary is labeled as opinion. The lawsuit also reflects a broader strategic aim to reset the tone of political dialogue and media accountability. For many observers, the courtroom is now one of the last arenas where narrative dominance can be effectively contested. With so much of the media ecosystem dominated by progressive commentary, lawsuits like this one serve as a method of challenging the casual denigration that often accompanies coverage of conservative individuals. While media outlets have long defended their content as protected speech, critics argue that the protection of free speech should not extend to baseless personal attacks that aim to ruin reputations without recourse. This lawsuit doesn't emerge in a vacuum. It builds on a growing wave of frustration from conservatives who feel they have been unfairly maligned in the press. The sense of imbalance is particularly acute when young, articulate, and ambitious conservative women enter the public sphere. Instead of being treated with the respect afforded to their liberal counterparts, they are often trivialized, sexualized, or painted as tokens. These portrayals not only undermine the individuals involved, but send a broader signal that ideological conformity is a prerequisite for respectful treatment in mainstream media spaces. Leavitt's legal action taps directly into these sentiments. By framing the comments as not just inappropriate but legally actionable, she is elevating the debate from the realm of social media arguments into a formal courtroom setting. There, the standards of evidence and accountability differ significantly from those in the court of public opinion. It forces a confrontation between media influence and legal responsibility, where truth and impact are weighed not by audience reaction but by judicial scrutiny. This transition from passive victimhood to active litigation reframes the narrative entirely, casting her not as a target of ridicule, but as a challenger to the status quo. The lawsuit filed against The View has not only shaken the program's public image, but also triggered serious internal consequences for the network that airs it. The response from the network's leadership and stakeholders has been swift and multifaceted, revealing the high stakes involved when a flagship daytime talk show is caught in a reputational crisis. Behind the scenes, damage control measures have taken center stage as the network scrambles to contain the fallout from the lawsuit, which alleges harmful and defamatory statements made by the show's co-hosts during a nationally televised broadcast. 1. Of the most immediate concerns has been the reaction from advertisers and corporate sponsors. The companies that financially support the show are highly sensitive to controversy, especially when it involves legal risk and reputational exposure. Early indicators suggest that several brands have already paused their campaigns or asked to have their advertisements pulled from upcoming episodes. While some have done so quietly to avoid making headlines themselves, others have issued cautious public statements reaffirming their commitment to inclusive dialogue and respectful media engagement. The ripple effects of such responses can be substantial, not just in terms of ad revenue, but also in shaping how future sponsors approach partnerships with politically charged programming. Internally, the network has reportedly held a series of high-level meetings involving legal advisors, crisis communication teams, and executives responsible for programming. These meetings have focused on several critical areas: assessing legal exposure, crafting public responses, and managing talent expectations. Legal departments are not only reviewing the episode in question, but are now tasked with examining other potentially problematic segments to determine if similar liabilities might be present elsewhere in the show's archives. The goal is not only to mount a defense against the current lawsuit, but also to prevent additional claims from emerging. At the same time, public relations professionals within the organization have been working around the clock to frame the issue in a way that minimizes long-term damage. They have issued statements that walk a fine line, defending the host's right to express opinions while also signaling a willingness to take concerns seriously. This balancing act reflects the tightrope networks walk when dealing with controversies, involving talent who are both central to their brand and capable of generating polarizing reactions. The show's producers have also been put in a delicate position. On one hand, they must protect the creative autonomy and spontaneous energy that have defined the show's format for decades. On the other, they now face increased pressure to vet content more thoroughly and ensure that editorial boundaries are not crossed. According to some insider reports, producers have been instructed to adopt more rigorous pre-show screening processes, particularly for politically sensitive segments. This includes closer scrutiny of talking points, redefined guidelines for on-air language, and even the possibility of implementing short delays to allow for real-time content monitoring. Meanwhile, tensions among the on-air talent have reportedly intensified. Although the hosts have stood by their comments in public, there have been quiet disagreements over how the situation has been handled. Some believe the network did not act quickly enough to support them, while others feel that the controversy could have been avoided entirely with more editorial oversight. These differing perspectives have led to visible unease on set, contributing to an air of uncertainty around future episodes and potential changes in the cast or format of the show. From a programming standpoint, the network is also beginning to face viewer erosion, not necessarily a mass exodus, but a noticeable dip in ratings attributed to the backlash and ongoing controversy. Audience trust, especially for daytime talk shows, is a delicate thing. It is built on a sense of familiarity, relatability, and credibility. When viewers perceive that a show has crossed a line, especially in a way that feels mean-spirited or politically charged, loyalty can waver. This presents a real challenge for the network, which now must consider whether it needs to refresh the show's tone, cast, or editorial direction to stabilize its audience base. Adding to the complexity is the wider media ecosystem in which the controversy is playing out. The lawsuit and its surrounding discourse have become a talking point across cable news, online platforms, and social media, amplifying the reputational stakes. Rival commentators and platforms have seized on the incident to criticize not just the program but the broader culture of partisan media, framing the situation as emblematic of a network that has lost touch with accountability. This further complicates the network's crisis response, as it must now manage narratives not just on its own platform, but across a hostile media landscape that is eager to capitalize on its missteps. The lawsuit filed against the daytime talk show has ignited a firestorm of public debate that extends far beyond the courtroom. Across social media, political forums, and commentary platforms, the incident has become a flashpoint in ongoing discussions about media bias, double standards, and the boundaries of responsible journalism. At the heart of the controversy is a growing sense among viewers and critics alike that certain ideological voices are treated with contempt, while others are shielded under the guise of progressive tolerance. This case in particular has struck a chord with those who believe the mainstream media has evolved into a one-sided echo chamber, unwilling to offer fair treatment to voices that do not conform to prevailing narratives. Within hours of the controversial broadcast, social media platforms were flooded with reactions. Hashtags calling for boycotts of the show began trending, with thousands of users expressing outrage over what they viewed as a personal attack masked as political banter. Memes, commentary videos, and grassroots calls to action spread quickly, transforming the lawsuit into a symbol of a broader cultural grievance. Many people saw it as confirmation that certain talk shows and networks are willing to cross ethical lines to discredit those who challenge their ideological comfort zones. The narrative gained traction not because it was legally complex, but because it resonated deeply with audiences who feel they have witnessed this pattern time and time again. Beyond social media, the debate has moved into mainstream political commentary. Analysts, journalists, and influencers across the ideological spectrum have weighed in, with some defending the show's right to offer spirited opinion and satire, and others insisting that there is a difference between political critique and personal degradation. This divide reflects a deeper cultural fault line, the tension between freedom of expression and accountability. Supporters of the lawsuit argue that when media personalities use their platforms to ridicule, demean, or undermine people based on appearance or identity rather than ideas, they are contributing to a toxic media environment that discourages diversity of thought. This concern is particularly acute in the context of how different political identities are treated on air. Critics argue that progressive figures are often portrayed as nuanced and thoughtful, even when their views are controversial, while those who diverge from that mold are frequently caricatured, mocked, or reduced to superficial traits. In the ECA case at hand, the comments made on the show were seen by many as not only insulting, but emblematic of a broader dismissiveness toward an entire demographic. Viewers from outside the traditional support base of the program found the remarks condescending and indicative of a media elite that uses humor and sarcasm as a shield against accountability. Media watchdog organizations have also entered the conversation. Several have issued statements calling for an independent review of the segment in question, suggesting that the show has exhibited a pattern of partisan bias that may be at odds with the network's public standards. These organizations emphasize that talk shows, while often categorized as entertainment, have substantial influence over public opinion and should be held to higher standards when discussing individuals in the public sphere. They argue that when media entities fail to self-correct, they open themselves up to both legal and ethical scrutiny, which can erode public trust in journalism as a whole. Meanwhile, the conversation has also sparked important questions about gender and professionalism. There has been a noticeable outcry from women's advocacy groups who believe that the commentary during the broadcast undermined the achievements of women by reducing success to appearance and insinuation. These groups have emphasized the importance of recognizing the professional capabilities of women across the political spectrum, warning that selectively applied respect only reinforces regressive stereotypes. Their stance has added a layer of intersectionality to the debate, bringing attention to the ways in which gender and ideology can intersect in harmful ways in media representation, even among those who do not necessarily support the individual. Targeted in the lawsuit, there is a growing awareness that the tone and language used in the broadcast crossed a line that many feel should not be normalized. For a portion of the audience, this incident serves as a wake-up call about how entertainment-driven political discourse can devolve into character attacks that obscure substance. It also calls into question the responsibility of media producers and hosts to foster environments where disagreement does not automatically devolve into personal insult. In the broader media landscape, the controversy has contributed to an increasingly polarized discourse around credibility and bias. It has emboldened critics of legacy media institutions and encouraged calls for greater accountability, not just from individual shows, but from the networks that support and promote them. The result is a public more alert to perceived inconsistencies and more willing to challenge the traditional boundaries of acceptable media behavior. The legal action taken against the daytime talk show has the potential to mark a pivotal shift in how public figures confront media narratives and assert boundaries in an increasingly polarized information environment. What makes this particular lawsuit so impactful is not simply the size of the claim or the high-profile nature of the parties involved, but the broader implications it may carry for the future of media accountability. It signals a growing sentiment that individuals, particularly those outside the mainstream ideological current, are no longer willing to accept misrepresentation or personal attacks as the price of public life. Instead, they are turning to the legal system as a means of recourse, pushing back against the notion that high-profile media platforms can comment freely without consequence. In recent years, there has been a noticeable trend. Commentary on television has become increasingly personal, combative, and emotionally charged. What was once delivered with caution and care is now often blurted out for effect, chasing ratings or viral moments. Hosts on widely viewed programs are not just sharing opinions, they are shaping public perception through tone, framing, and selective emphasis. As media personalities gain influence akin to that of elected officials or cultural leaders, their words carry significant weight. This dynamic has led many to question whether the long-standing legal protections offered to media figures, particularly under the banner of opinion or satire, should still hold when those opinions have demonstrable, real-world consequences. This lawsuit challenges the informal immunity that high-profile media shows have often enjoyed. While the courtroom may ultimately determine the legality of the statements made, the very act of bringing the case to court sends a message that traditional norms of discourse are no longer off-limits to scrutiny. It opens the door for others, who feel they have been unfairly portrayed, misrepresented, or personally attacked in the media to consider similar action. The ripple effect could be profound. If more individuals begin to pursue legal remedies in response to defamatory or reckless commentary, media outlets will face mounting pressure to ensure the accuracy, fairness, and tone of their programming. Editorial policies may also evolve in response. Already, some networks are reportedly revisiting internal protocols to mitigate future risk. This includes strengthening pre-broadcast review processes, implementing more rigorous legal screenings for politically charged content, and offering clearer guidance to on-air talent about the line between commentary and defamation. If the legal system begins to establish more precedents in this area, the boundaries of permissible media speech may gradually be redefined, not by regulatory agencies, but by the courts. Such a shift could recalibrate the tone of political media coverage altogether. Viewers and readers may begin to see less reliance on ad hominem attacks, character-based insinuations, and theatrical outbursts. In their place, programs might return to a focus on ideas, policy, and measured debate. While this would not eliminate bias or partisanship, it could create a healthier public discourse, one in which individuals are critiqued for their positions rather than mocked for their identity or background. The demand for this kind of change is not limited to one demographic. Across the ideological spectrum, people are growing weary of sensationalism masquerading as journalism. From a strategic standpoint, the decision to pursue legal redress is also a form of narrative control. It takes the power of interpretation away from producers and panelists and places it into the hands of a judge or jury. This recentering of authority can be seen as a corrective mechanism in a media landscape that many perceive as lacking checks and balances. For those who feel outnumbered or ignored by dominant media voices, the courtroom becomes one of the few spaces where their grievances can be aired on equal footing. This legal development also challenges the assumption that influential shows can operate without structural accountability. While networks have internal standards and review boards, these mechanisms often prioritize public relations over substantive correction. A lawsuit forces a different kind of reckoning, one governed not by public opinion but by legal definitions and evidentiary standards. It represents a rare moment in which media elites must justify their conduct before an authority that does not answer to ratings, sponsors, or political agendas. The broader cultural impact of this confrontation is still unfolding, but it has already initiated a conversation about where the line should be drawn between commentary and character attack. It questions whether large platforms have a responsibility not just to entertain and inform, but to maintain a baseline of integrity in their portrayal of public figures. The lawsuit acts as a potential turning point, one that could reset the expectations placed on those who shape the national conversation. If it leads to greater introspection within the media, or even minor changes in editorial policy, its influence may extend far beyond the courtroom and into the very fabric of public dialogue. The legal clash sparked by the remarks on the daytime talk show has grown into much more than a dispute between an individual and a media outlet. It now serves as a reflection of deeper societal currents. At the core of this controversy lies a growing demand for accountability in how powerful platforms wield their influence. The lawsuit stands as a challenge not just to a single segment or a few remarks, but to the entire culture of partisan media that many argue has strayed from the principles of respectful discourse, fairness, and fact-based commentary. In today's media landscape, where emotion often overrides substance and personal attacks generate more attention than thoughtful debate, this lawsuit functions as both a legal mechanism and a cultural statement. It underscores a rising resistance to the idea that certain individuals or ideologies can be publicly ridiculed without consequence, simply because they fall outside the mainstream narrative. The message is clear. The rules of engagement in public discourse should apply universally, not selectively, and ideological differences should not be a license for personal degradation. While freedom of speech remains a foundational right, it coexists with responsibilities, particularly when speech occurs on platforms that reach millions of viewers and carry the power to shape reputations. The court will decide the legal outcome, but regardless of the verdict, this moment has already influenced public perception. It has sparked renewed debate about where the line should be drawn between critical commentary and defamation, between political disagreement and character assassination. For many observers, the lawsuit is not about silencing voices, but about demanding a higher standard for the way those voices engage with the public. It's also a pivotal moment for media institutions themselves. Programs that have long thrived on unfiltered opinions and provocative exchanges must now reckon with the consequences of their tone and tactics. This incident may inspire internal reflection, policy revisions, or even a broader shift in how networks train and guide their on-air talent. If that happens, it won't be because of regulatory pressure or audience backlash alone. It will be the result of individuals insisting on dignity and fairness, even when it means standing up to some of the most influential voices in media. Ultimately, this case resonates because it touches on something fundamental: the desire for respectful representation in public life. Regardless of political affiliation, people want to see themselves and others treated with decency. The courtroom may offer a legal resolution, but the cultural conversation this lawsuit has sparked is likely to continue long after the headlines fade. It serves as a reminder that influence carries responsibility, and that fairness in public dialogue is not a luxury, it's a necessity.